Well, good morning. It's a great honor to be back at Sunny Hills. I love this church. I've been here several times in the past. And I know some of you. I started leading the hymns tours in 1985. And the one I led this past summer was my 19th, roughly every other year. And in, I think, 85, then I led one in 88. 92, I think, is when the Hawley girls went with me. It was either 92 or 93. Do you know which year it was? 93. So Ellen and Susan, is that right? And their mom, Harriet, I've known them a long time, and they were on this tour in 93. And then Jim and Susie Lentz, are they here today?
They'll be here next service.
Oh, next service. They went with me in 2007. And then John and Linda Free, are they here today? Hello. They went in 2013, I think it was. So those are the families on my hymns tour. And then Randy and Jill I've met when they were at Central in Bakersfield, so I've known them a long time. And I can't remember the last time I preached here, but I've been here off and on through the years. Last night I got to thinking that when I was the editor of Pacific Church News, I sent my reporter, Emily Limley, editor of Power for Today, out here to watch the performance of Les Mis in 1993. The article was about Jim Lentz showing up and putting on this great performance. They took 8 scenes from Les Mis. We had just seen, do you know what play we saw in 93? Was it Les Mis? We always went to a play in, oh, okay. I know that we saw Mary Poppins with the Lentz, and we saw Top Hat with the Frees. But in my early years, I was taking people to see Les Mis, and I couldn't believe a local church could put on Les Mis, even 8 scenes of it. And I'm reading this article last night, and it got down to the last paragraph, and some guy named Ken Holland at the end said, "This was such a good program, we think we'll do another. We're looking for another play we can do next year." That's how the article ended. You didn't even remember you said that. But I printed it and mailed it out to everybody. It was in that was 1993. Well, here's my lesson for today. I've given the title of Remember Your Songs. And I want to show you 2 bookends. And then you need to grab your hymn book. If I'm speaking, we're doing both Bible and hymn book. So the first bookend I want to give you is from Deuteronomy 32. It starts right at the end of 31. And here's the setting. The children of Israel have left Egypt. They're wandering in the wilderness. Now they're getting ready to go into the promised land. But Moses has been told, you will not join them. Moses is going to end up on Mount Nebo. I was there recently with our Pepperdine students on Mount Nebo. Wow, from up there, on a clear day, you can see all the way to the Mediterranean. And down below is Jericho, and you can see the Jordan River. So Moses doesn't get to go. But the children are about to cross the Jordan. This is so significant in our hymnology, even in our funerals. I have talked about this, that when we die, it's like we're crossing the Jordan into heaven, into the promised land. I heard that as a young boy, and then when I started doing funerals, I used that illustration. Moses is told by God that he needs to challenge his people because he's not going to go with them. And so he sings them a song. And I don't have time. It's a long song. I don't have time for the whole thing. But let's start it like this. This is at the end of Deuteronomy 31. And Moses recited the words of this song from beginning to end in the hearing of the whole assembly of Israel. And this is what he's singing to them. Listen, you heavens, and I will speak. Hear, you earth, the words of my mouth. Let my teaching fall like rain and my words descend like dew, like showers on new grass, like abundant rain on tender plants. I will proclaim the name of the Lord. Oh, praise the greatness of our God. That's the main theme over and over in the Song of Moses, that God is a great God. God is a faithful God. God is just. God will never forget His people. They may forget Him, but He will never forget them. Oh, praise the greatness of our God. He is the rock. His works are perfect, and all His ways are just. A faithful God who does no wrong, upright, and just is He. They are corrupt and not His children. Now He's looking at these people. You have been corrupt, and you know you have been. And they are corrupt and not His children. To their shame, they are a warped and crooked generation. Is this the way you repay the Lord? Here's Moses singing to Israel on the verge of the Jordan River from Mount Nebo. Is this the way you repay the Lord, you foolish and unwise people? Is He not your Father, your Creator, who made you and formed you? Remember the days of old. You knew we were going to get there. You got an old historian speaking to you this morning. I love lines like, remember the days of old, because I am old. Remember the days of old. Consider the generations long past. Ask your father. He will tell you. Ask the elders. They will explain to you. It goes on and on for another 40 verses. The Song of Moses. Remember your songs. He watches them as they cross the Jordan into the Promised Land. But jump ahead to when they're carried away into captivity, and their enemies are making fun of them and saying, sing us some of those songs. They don't really want to hear them. They're teasing them. Sing us your songs. And the psalmist writes in Psalm 137, how can we sing the songs of the Lord while we're in a foreign land? But the point is, yes, you must sing. You must keep singing. Even when you are being abused, even when you are being confronted and challenged. Now, how does this whole story end? John has a revelation. How does the Bible end? John says, I saw this picture of everyone singing around the throne of God. It's in Revelation 15. And what were they singing? Would you believe that John says they were singing the Song of Moses? But he goes a little further. They were singing the Song of Moses and the Lamb. In Revelation, the Lamb of God is the risen Christ. They are singing He is the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. They're singing the Song of Moses and the Lamb. But only recently did it occur to me that John actually gives us a few words of what they're singing. I mean, I know Deuteronomy 32, but look at the text here. Great and marvelous are your deeds, Lord God Almighty. This is what we are singing around the throne of God. Just and true are your ways, King of the ages. Who will not fear you, O Lord, and bring glory to your name? For you alone are holy. All nations will come and worship before you, for your righteous acts have been revealed. So this is the scene. Now open your hymn book. How has this impacted our singing through the years? And I asked Ken to lead these songs. So let's start with 886. You sang this. We've sung it all of our life, and we sing it fast, and we're not even paying attention to what we're singing. Now, I need to say right here, I've given you two sources, the Song of Moses and then Revelation, the Song of Moses and the Lamb. I've left out a source, but I'll get to it in just a moment. On Jordan's stormy banks, where does this come from? The banks being stormy. I was just at the Jordan not long ago. It's from it's from me to you. It's a very small stream. It's not stormy. This is poetic license. The poet here is talking about the storm. He says, on Jordan's stormy banks I stand and cast a wishful eye to Canaan's land. Well, it's not that far across that stream to Canaan's fair and happy land where my possessions lie. And then the chorus, we will rest in the fair and happy land by and by, just across on the evergreen shore. Now he's talking about heaven now. Sing the song of Moses and the Lamb by and by, and dwell with Jesus evermore. Who writes the words? This will be on my final exam in a moment that I'm handing out. So look down at the bottom of the page, Samuel Stinnett. Now, if you've been on my hymns tour, I've taken you to his grave. You go to Bunhill Fields in London, everybody is buried there who was not in the Church of England. This is the nonconformists like you and me. These are the non-Anglicans. And this is, we go to the grave of Isaac Watts, the father of the English hymn, and we sing the songs of Isaac Watts around his grave. And a few feet from Isaac Watts are John Bunyan, who writes Pilgrim's Progress. And then we walk through the cemetery singing around the different graves. And we come to Samuel Stinnett, and we sing this song. When did he write it? 1787. Going back a long time, we've been singing this. Samuel Stinnett's grandfather was the minister of a Seventh-day Baptist church who felt that the Sabbath is still Saturday. And his father was a minister of the first day of the week Baptist church, Sunday. And when both of them died, he replaced both of them. And so he would preach on Saturday night at his grandfather's church, and he would preach on Sunday morning at his father's church. He was the minister of both, Samuel Stinnett. And he writes these great words. The second song we sang was 747. Is that right? Turn to 747. But remember Samuel Stinnett, because it'll be on the exam in a moment. Now, who wrote this at the bottom? It says Carrie Wilson. But when you were singing it, that's not what it said up here, because you were using the paperless hymnal. Carrie Wilson is a pen name, a pseudonym. The real author is Fanny Crosby, and she writes over 7,000 songs. Fanny Crosby is blind from the age of 1.5, and she doesn't write her first song until she's 44. You wonder, how many would this woman have written if she'd started at 18? 44, and she writes over 7,000. But out of her blindness, she gives us these lines, that we are all pilgrims. This is not our home. We're just passing through planet Earth. We're on our way to our home. And she writes, sing on, ye joyful pilgrims, nor think the moments long. My faith is heavenward rising with every tuneful song. Lo, on the mount of blessing, the glorious mount I stand, and looking over Jordan, I see the promised land. Here's the theme again. Sing on, O blissful music. While here on earth we stay, let songs of home and Jesus beguile each fleeting day. Sing on the grand old story of redeeming love. But look at verse 3. Sing on, ye joyful pilgrims, the time will not be long, till in our Father's kingdom we swell a nobler song, where those we love are waiting to greet us on the shore. We'll meet beyond the river, where surges roll no more. Or the third song I chose from the poet laureate himself of Wales, William Williams, number 390. Now I'm deliberately doing a cross-section here where the first one I gave you from Samuel Stinnett was written in London. The second one, Now We Come to America, is written in New York by Fanny Crosby. And now we go to Wales. Why not go to Wales? And here is the great poet laureate, William Williams. And what's the date for this? 1745. He lived at Penticellin. Laurie and I went there in 1986. We were the faculty family in London, and we drove over to Central Wales. And I got to the house. I was so excited, and got out of the car, and we had our little 2-year-old daughter, Hillary, was 2, in the back seat. And we weren't planning to bother these people, but I got out of my car, and I tiptoed over a little bit and got my camera out. I just want to get a picture of Penticellin, where the great William Williams wrote his music. And the girl came out the front door. She had heard the car. She was 13. put her hands on her hips. I can still see her looking at me. And I thought, oh, I'm interrupting these people's privacy. And I said, I'm really sorry. I just want to take a picture of the house. Is it okay? We won't be here very long. I'm stumbling over my words while she's staring at me. And I said, would it be all right? And she said, yes, but that's not a very good location. Well, what would be a better location? She said, well, most people go on this rise over here. Oh, I go over to this rise in the hill, and oh, you're right. My, the whole house. Wow, this is great. And I'm taking my picture, and I said, do people come here often? Yeah, she said. I mean, like every month? Yeah. I mean, like every week? Do you have, yeah. Does the Williams family still live here 250 years later? And she looks at me like, you ask the dumbest question. Where else would we be living? I wanted to say in America, hard to believe, but some people change homes a few times in there. I said, the Williams family is still living here. Do you happen to know which generation you are from William Williams, the poet laureate, the great hymn writer? And she actually straightened her shoulders in pride, and I thought stood a little taller when she said to me, I'm generation 7. And the moment she said it, generation 6 came out the front door. Mama came out, and she was going, come on in the house, waving at me, come on in. And I'm saying, oh, we didn't come to bother you. I've got my wife here. And then she goes to the car, get out of the car, come on in. So now we're in the house. And when we walk in the house, there's generation 5. Grandma's sitting at the dining room table doing some knitting. And we are served tea and cookies and scones. And 9 years later, I went back with my film crew and with Bill Henniger, who was elder, in Long Beach. And Bill Henniger was my director, and Dutch Hoggett from Abilene Christian, he's at Harding now. He was my videographer, and I was filmed in 100 locations telling my stories, and we were putting these DVDs together. And I went back to interview, and this girl who was 13 was now 22, and she had just gotten married. And we filmed all this in the old farmhouse. Well, when William Williams wrote this, he wrote it in Welsh, but it's translated, and in the translation, look here at the bottom of your page, William Williams wrote it in 1745, and it doesn't give the man who translated it here. The tune is Zion, but look at what he writes. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim. Here's that idea again. Pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand. But look at verse 3. When I tread the verge of Jordan, bid my anxious fears subside. Something is missing here. That was not in Deuteronomy 32. They weren't bidding their anxious fears. And that was not there in what we're singing around the throne of God in heaven. What is the missing source here? It is John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, which is quickly this story. The main character is Christian, and one day in his attic, he finds a book. It doesn't say it's the Bible, but it is. And he reads it. And until that moment, he had no idea where he was going, if there was any purpose in life. But now he recognizes that he is living in the city of destruction, and he needs to be on his way to the celestial city. And he talks to his wife and their 4 children, but none of them want to go with him. And he takes off, and he's carrying a burden on his back, a sack, and it's full of his sins. And one of the characters that meets him on the road is Evangelist. And he says, you want to go in that direction? Do you see the light way out there on the horizon? And he starts walking. This is Pilgrim's Progress. And he meets all these people, faithful, travels with him for a while. And they make a mistake, and they go off into a little city called Vanity Fair. And that's not a magazine. That's a city from Pilgrim's Progress. And And there they are persecuted because they are pursuing God. And this Vanity Fair has no interest in God. It's eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. That's Vanity Fair. And long story short, Faithful is killed there. They burn him at the stake for his faith in God. And Christian, they put him in jail. But he finally finds a way to get out. And there's another character there, Hopeful. And Hopeful comes up to Christian and says, I've been so impressed by you and Faithful. You're the only ones that seem to have any purpose, and can I travel with you? And he says yes. So now Christian and Hopeful are traveling, and they get off the road though, and they are taking what they thought was a shortcut, but it's not a shortcut. And they're sleeping one night in the grounds of a castle, but it's Doubting Castle. And the one who lives in Doubting Castle is a giant whose name is Despair. And he comes out the next morning and he grabs them and he takes them into the castle and he beats them and he says, you will never get out. You will never get out. Give up right now. But earlier in the story, Christian had gone to the cross and the burden had fallen off. All of his sins had fallen off at the cross, and 3 angels had come and blessed him, and one gave him a key that she put in his pocket, and she said, this is the key of promise. It reminds you of the promises of God. And now he and Hopeful are in here, and they're being beaten up, and the days go by, and they're giving up all hope, and the giant takes them to see the bones of all the Christians before them who have made their way through Doubting Castle, and they've all died there. And they think that it's all over. And then deep at night, in the dark of night, Christian is feeling around his coat. He remembers the key and he brings it out and he says, Hopeful, I forgot about this key. It's called promise. And they fall back on the promises of God, and he goes and he tries it in the lock and it works and they get out the door. But then there's another door and another lock, and yet there's a third one, and the giant wakes up and pursues them, but they get away. And they go through the valley of the shadow of death and all that. It's a great book, but how does it end? It ends the only way it can end. It ends at the river, of course, the crossing of the Jordan. And they get there. Now in John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, it is storming, and it is wide, and it is deep. You can't see the bottom, and you can't figure out how you're going to get over there. And the two of them get there at the end. And this is the other source of these hymns. And they try to figure out, if they walk way up here, could they get over? No. If they walk way, is there a boat anywhere? No. And this is the only way. But on the other side, there's Mount Zion. That's a language for heaven. And they can hear the singing. They can hear the singing. Now turn to the 4th song that was led, which is number 227. 227. Now, who writes this? John Kent. Now, John Kent, so we've done London, we've done New York, we've done Wales. Now we'll go to the West Country. This is in Devonshire, out by Cornwall. We're in Devon. And here's John Kent. And when does he publish this? 1803, when he was 37. But he might have written it earlier. John Kent was not a minister like Samuel Stinnett. He worked on ships, but he was a poet. And he was a devout Christian man, and he wrote some great poetry. Can you imagine what it's like the night he sits down in his home somewhere in Devon, and he writes these words? It's like Ken said, he's already in heaven, but he's picturing it. He's getting this from Pilgrim's Progress. He writes, on Zion's glorious summit stood a numerous host. And what did they have in common? Everyone singing around the throat of God. They had all washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb. That's what they had in common. On Zion's glorious summit stood a numerous host redeemed by blood. They hymned their King in strains divine. I heard the song and I walked quietly. No. I heard the song and I strove to join. It suggests running, energy. I wanted to be a part, but there's a river between us. So how does the story end? John Bunyan says they came to the river and they didn't think they could get across. But Hopeful jumped in, and he started across. But Christian didn't think he would try it. He was going to die there on the shore. But Hopeful gets across halfway, and he turns around and he sees that Christian is on the edge, but he says to him, "Be of good cheer, my brother. My feet have touched the bottom, and it is sound. It can hold us." And Christian plunges in, but he doesn't believe as strongly as Hopeful, and he goes under. And Hopeful goes back, and he lifts his head above the water. But Christian can't believe he's been forgiven for all of his sins. Remembering all of his sins, he goes under again. But Hopeful is saying, God has not given up on you. God has washed away your sins. Christ died for you. You've got to believe that. He's giving him encouragement. And more now, Christian is finding his footing. And when they get to the other side, the angels are there. And they start up to Mount Zion. They can hear the singing. This is Pilgrim's Progress. Now, I close with this story. I taught homiletics. That's the preparation and delivery of sermons at Pepperdine for 19 years. And every class I taught on homiletics, I acted out a sermon that was preached in January or early February of 1927 in Aberdeen, Scotland. And I would say to them, this life is called, but when life tumbles in, what then? When life tumbles in. And the man who wrote it, Arthur John Gossip, was 53 years old and 5 children. His wife was younger than him. She was in her 40s. And his wife suddenly dies. No one saw this coming. She went to the hospital. It was supposed to be minor surgery. She never came out. And he preached this sermon on the next Sunday after her funeral. And it was entitled, "But When Life Tumbles In, What Then?" Batzel Barrett Baxter from our own fellowship, our own radio and TV evangelist in the 1950s and 60s. In 1974, he wrote a book called When Life Tumbles In. He didn't tell the source of it. He thought, well, you're not going to know that guy. But those of us who preach all knew where he got this from. And he wrote a book about going through the tough times in life. And he preaches this sermon. And he says to his people, this is at Beech Grove Church back in Aberdeen. I went back there one day, years ago, walked in. I said to the secretary, I know you get a lot of people here. I'm just another American preacher. I just wondered if I could see the pulpit. She said, I understand. Come in. She took me in. She said, well, there it is. I said, is it in the same location it was where Arthur John Gossip preached in 1927? She said, oh, yeah, it's unchanged. I said, do you mind if I'm alone here for a while? Not at all. She closed the door. I went up to the pulpit. I stood, I looked at the balconies, and I tried to picture Arthur John Gossip saying these words that I had acted out for 19 years. And I don't have time for the whole sermon. I'll just tell you how it ends. In this dramatic finish, he says to his congregation, and I said it out loud that day. I was standing alone at his pulpit. I don't think you need to be afraid of life. Our hearts are very frail. And there are places where the road is very steep and very lonely. This is a man who's just buried the love of his life. And he's been left with 5 children, some are still pretty small. There are places where the road is very steep and very lonely. But we have a wonderful God. And as Paul puts it, what can separate us from his love? Not death. This is Romans 8. Not death, he says immediately, pushing that aside at once as the most obvious of all impossibilities. Death can't separate us. And here's his finish. No, not death. For standing in the roaring of the Jordan, cold to the heart with its dreadful chill, and very conscious of the terror of its rushing, I too, like hopeful, can call back to you, my church here at Beech Grove. I can call back to you one day in your turn. You will have to cross it, and I will call back to you. Be of good cheer, my brother, for I feel the bottom, and it is sound. Wow. We're going to close by singing number 509, so let's turn to it. And we're probably not going to have time for the final exam because we got to have our brunch together. So 509. Who wrote 509? Francis Rowley. Great hymn writer, right? How many hymns did Francis Rowley write? This one. This is it. He quit. And his young, he was 32 and he wrote these words, and his young minister of music, Peter Bilhorn, was 21. This was 1886. This was in North Adams, Massachusetts at the Baptist Church. I went back there just a few years ago, talked to the church secretary and the minister, and I said, the house used to be number 24 down here on Church Street, and what is it today? And she said, yeah, all the numbers have changed. It's number 130. I said, well, I'd like to walk down there and take a picture. And I told them the story as I understood it, and they said, yeah, you've got it right. The young Peter Bilhorn, who wrote a lot of church music, came to Francis Rowley and said, if you would write a hymn, I would write music for you. And Rowley said, I've never tried to write a hymn, I don't know. But he went home that night, on that Sunday night after church, and he wrote these words. But he didn't write, I will sing the wondrous story. He wrote, can't we sing the wondrous story? Can't we sing it? And he sent it to Ira Sankey, the famous song leader for Dwight L. Moody. And Sankey said, this is very good, but you don't want can't we sing it. You want I will sing it. You're too hesitant here. And he made that one change. And then Peter Bilhorn wrote this music. So follow me now. I will sing the wondrous story of the Christ who died for me, how he left his home in glory for the cross of Calvary. I was lost, but Jesus found me, found the sheep that went astray. Through his loving arms around me, drew me back into his way. How long is the promise good for? I close with this. We have the key in our pocket to the promises of God. How long are they good for? What this deal that we've made with God? Francis Rowley that night says, he will keep me till the river rolls its waters at my feet. Here again, the crossing of the Jordan, the song of Moses, the song of the Lamb. It's the whole history of the Bible. He will keep me till the river rolls its waters at my feet. Then he'll bear me safely over where the loved ones I shall meet. Wow, what a great song. I went down to the house. It's now all apartments. It was once the big parsonage of the preacher. And a man walked out, and I'm taking a picture of his house, and he says, what are you doing? And I said, you know, the minister of the Baptist church used to live here, Francis Rowley, and he wrote a hymn in this house. He said, no kidding. What was it? I said, he wrote, I'm already losing I will sing the wondrous story. And this guy said to me, we sang that last week at church. He said, are you sure you're right? And I said, it was written in this house. I don't know which room it was written in, but I know it was written here in 1886. And as he walked by me and headed into town, I thought he was walking a little taller too, with his that he lived in a house where this great hymn was written. Well, we're just going to stand in a moment and sing these three. If you need the prayers of this church, or if you're ready to be baptized into Christ, this would be a good time. We're going to have brunch together. I'm going to have a different lesson, much briefer, at 11:40 for the second group, if you want to stay for that. I just want to talk about the line, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. It's a brief lesson. I'm just going to tell you how to live each day of your life, basically. And you may already know how to do that, so you don't need to come back. Well, I've really enjoyed my return to Sunny Hills. It's a great church. You're very fortunate to have this fellowship and be a part of this group. And I ask you to come to Pepperdine. The Bible lectures are May 5 to 8. The reason I'm here today is Christian Education Sunday. I don't direct them anymore, but they are great. Mike Cope and Rick Gibson. And it's going to be a marvelous week. We open on Tuesday night. Our preacher this year is Phil Blackman. Phil preaches at the largest Church of Christ in Oklahoma, Memorial Road, next to Oklahoma Christian University, Phil Brookman. And then it ends on Friday. I teach a class each day at the end of the lunch hour. My class this year is called Pepperdine University and Churches of Christ. No, Pepperdine Presidents and Churches of Christ. And the first day I'm doing George Pepperdine, Batzel Baxter, and Hugh Tyner. The second day I'm doing Norval Young, Bill Banowski, and Howard White. And the third day I'm doing David Davenport, Andy Benton, and Jim Gash. And on the first day, Wednesday, the 6th, I'm doing a 2.5-hour seminar in the library where I now work called Our Journey in Churches of Christ, a Conversation. And I've picked 6 people to lead a conversation. I'm just going to guide the conversation. And it's John Mark Hicks and John Wilson from Pepperdine and Senator Jack Scott from the church over here at Sierra Madre and Rhonda Lowry, the wife of the president of Lipscomb University. I've put together 6 people, and they're going to have a conversation about the positive things they've experienced in Churches of Christ. We always hear the negative. We're going to have 2.5-hour discussion on the positives. And I'll even turn and let the audience chime in from time to time. That's going to be on that afternoon of Wednesday, May 6th, Wednesday, May 6th. That one goes from 2 to 4:30. But earlier, I teach every day from 12:20 to 12:45. Anyway, we'll be mailing you the booklets. They're off the press now. They'll probably be in the mail this next week or 2, and you'll all see it. And I know Randy and Jill come, but all of you ought, if you can come, it's just a great experience. Well, remember your songs. Even when people are persecuting you, remember your songs. Let's all stand and sing these 3 verses. I will